Welcome to the Brainstorm with Sparks and Finn, a podcast where we brainstorm the science and philosophy of a new age, an electric universe age, and what it means for the human race, past, present, and future. I'm Finn, sci-fi author, researcher, and a guy who appreciates a little 144 Hz healing magic when low on hit points.
And I'm Sparks, physicist, experimentalist, and secret lich, whose undead vessel takes damage from 144 Hz healing magic. But don't worry, my phylactery remains safely hidden in Finn's ossuary.
Today we're talking with a researcher, author, and mad scientist who uses her siren song of tuning forks to bewitch and befuddle the minds of her victims, and forces them to do her bidding. Whose research into biofield tuning could revolutionize our understanding of human biology. She also delivers one heck of a broadband shoulder rub. Introducing Eileen McKusick. All shall love her and despair. Today's springboard topic, biofield tuning. Why it works and what's going on beneath the hood. Buckle up, people. Let's see where this one goes.
Okay, so today, I guess, for our springboard, we'll just be going off of your topic. Are you presenting like a presentation, or are we just going to talk like...
We're just going to talk, yeah.
Good.
Well, then let me get a couple props.
Sure.
Okay, we have to have the Taurus.
I've got mine right over there. Yep. I've got that one too.
What is that thing?
It's just this fun little connectivity toy, but it's kind of useful. I used mine until the batteries went out.
Yeah, I mean, basically what it does is it just shows that. In fact, I was at an Electric Universe conference. I don't remember which one, but we made a big circle, the whole room, and we used this, right? And if anybody breaks the connection, then it stops. If everybody's holding hands, then it works. But you know, it's interesting. I used this in one of my classes, a very, very high energy class, and we all got in a circle and we held hands and we did this. But even when we took our hands off, it still was going off.
Oh, that's interesting.
Which we were all like, what? Like, how is that possible? It was like plasma charged, made it go or something. It was odd.
Yeah, that probably is exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've actually got a fun little segue to start this.
All right.
Eileen, I don't know if you remember this, but I gave you a lot of crap on when I first reached out to you, a lot of crap on social media.
Yes,
Because
you
you
did.
posted, Matt, you don't know about this, but I it wasn't trolling, but I was like, don't post this stuff and don't attribute it to the Electric Universe, because I was really skeptical of what she was doing, and she'll explain it. I'll let her do that. But I reached out to her on Facebook and said, hey, don't bring the Electric Universe into this. I don't think what you're doing is scientific. And I mean, just really, she was gracious enough to listen to my rants and just put salve on it, just put a blanket of calm. And that was enough to calm me down. And we started actually having a conversation, and it got to the point to where I changed my position 180 degrees and am now a client of hers.
Oh, nice.
How about
Ben
that?
and I are having this with AI. I'm a big fan. He's pretty skeptical. I think he's coming around, though.
A little bit.
Yeah. Well, we should be skeptical of tuning forks, and we should be skeptical of AI. Hey, I was skeptical of my work with tuning forks for 15 years. It took me writing a master's thesis on the topic, getting about 10,000 hours in the clinic under my belt, and training other people to do it before I finally believed in it. So I don't have a problem with skeptics. I'm an extremely skeptical person, and very much I need to see and experience something to believe it. So of course I've encountered a lot of skepticism over the years. I've been doing this for 29 years, playing with tuning forks, and people can be really mean about it, because there's something there's something about tuning forks and energy fields that's just like uncomfortably woo sounding, and I because of that, I really didn't want it to be my vocation. I understand that visceral rejection feeling. I even see other people with tuning forks, and I still feel that way. So, so I'm very patient with skeptics.
Well, we've had in the history of the earth, we've had thousands upon thousands of years where people understood this stuff. And then we've had about, I don't know, what, 60, 70 years where all of a sudden it's become woo. And I think as we look more into the past and find that our ancient civilizations weren't as primitive as we believed, maybe we're starting to realize that we're in a new dark age and we're just starting to arise from it.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, one of my favorite pastimes is to watch videos on old world architecture and previous civilizations. And it's very evident that humanity was far more advanced, far more attuned to sound and to the natural laws of the environment than we currently are. We've really shrouded the light and the truth in our culture.
I think so. Are you familiar with Jeffrey Drum?
Mm-mm.
You ever heard of that? So we just interviewed him like a week ago. He's a kid, probably Matt's age, who got interested in the pyramids in Egypt. And just through some natural curiosity, he saw an artifact there and said, wait a minute, what this looks like is that there was fluid coming in here, but it doesn't make any sense that it was water. He's like, yes, they used water, but this doesn't make any sense that there's water. So he started asking the question, what was there? And it led him to a whole explanation of what the pyramids are, Eileen. He's got it. He's got it nailed. I mean, were some of them used as burial chambers after the fact? Yes, they were. But were they originally intended for that? No. And he has made an absolutely rock solid case as to what the pyramids were for. And it's still growing. There's still parts of it that are just like, oh.
So what was the fluid if it wasn't water?
They were creating.
Should we?
Yeah, I don't want to spoil it.
Yeah, we don't want to spoil it. Eileen, you need to go watch it. I mean, his website is the Land of Chem, CHEM, Jeffrey Drum. We need to let you just watch it because it is overwhelming.
Well, the presentation is, once you're done reviewing it, as long as there's no mistakes, I'll publish it today.
Oh, wonderful.
So the brainstorm will be out where you can see us interviewing him. My suspicion is that,
so good.
The Hermetics played a huge part in Egyptian culture. I mean, that was their priest class, the keepers of their knowledge. One wonders if they had knowledge from some earlier period and they were passing it on, which I think that's what's going on here. But, referring to Eileen's work, one of the things that's blown me away is it's becoming more and more clear that everything, when you really boil everything down, everything is sound and vibration and frequency. And so why the heck wouldn't tuning your sound and vibration and frequency make a difference in you? I mean, that's what you're made out of. So to me, that seems like...
It's that logic that led me to it in the first place.
Yeah.
Right.
In coming to understand that everything is fundamentally vibration and light.
Yeah.
And then I'm vibration and light. So treating me with vibration is just logical and elegant. Right. And I think that once you scratch the surface with the tuning forks and energy fields and you go just a little bit deeper, it actually all makes sense. And that's what people say when they read my book or they get exposed to it. They're like, oh, this actually makes sense. I'm like, yeah, it makes sense. So I wouldn't do it if it didn't.
I came to the conclusion the same way because I looked at aspirin, acetaminophen, any tablet, any pill that you take. Ultimately, when you ingest it, it gets broken down and keeps broken down. But ultimately, the molecules of the stuff that you're ingesting are doing this. I'm like, wait a minute. How do we know that it isn't this that is the curative part of that? I mean, it's a frequency. They're vibrating at a certain frequency. How do we know that that's not it? I'm not sure that we do. And if that's it, then everything, food, drink, medicine, it's all frequency and vibration. So let's just push out the middleman and go right to frequency. That's what did it for me.
I've also heard that your teeth are your breaker box in a way that connect your electrical system to your body, and that's why your dental health is so important. I don't know. You ever heard anything about that?
Sure. Well, that's a lot of Jerry Tennant's work, where he really sees them as sort of endpoints in electrical circuitry. I have 21 of 32 teeth, and I'm doing okay in that department. Because, yeah, because they're also present energetically. Any organ you have removed still has its field. And so I just am looking at my teeth as, even though the teeth aren't there, the field is. So I don't feel bereft from missing all of these teeth.
That's what Michael Claridge was saying. I think I brought that up last week, where when you get your hand lopped off, the electrons that form the shape of your hand are still there and you still feel ghost pain. You had some issue with that, didn't you, Ben?
I like to study that scientifically. I am open to the idea. I'm not entirely convinced.
I think
I'm not going to poo-poo it.
Yeah, I'm thinking shape is a natural intrinsic property of matter, and that the shape comes first and the matter fills it up.
Yes. And even mainstream science is starting to see that it is magnetic fields that are giving rise to electric currents and to form.
Yeah.
Eileen, that's a really interesting point, because I was discussing that with my father-in-law the other day. We always talk about how the electric field gives rise to the magnetic field, but what if it's the opposite?
I think it's the opposite, because the feminine precedes the masculine. The magnetic fields guide and inform electric currents, and when a magnetic field becomes strong enough, then it generates that electricity. In our very male-centric world, we always want to put the male aspect first. In fact, I mean, magnetic fields are largely ignored in the whole medical field, in my experience. Even in the question of consciousness, they're like, oh, it's electricity in the brain. And I'm like, actually, it's a magnetic field of the whole body. But it's very hard for, and I don't mean to be sexist or too general, but in my experience, it's hard for men to think that way. It's a very male-driven science. And so in my work, electricity is more masculine, it's more mental body, whereas the magnetic field is more feminine, it's more emotional. And so then we're like, well, we don't want to pay attention to the feminine or the emotional. We're just going to stick with the electricity here. But it's a really important thing to consider. I mean, it's really where all of my work has been, is working in the magnetic field of the body and discovering that as I manipulate the magnetic field, it changes the way electric currents are moving in the body. So you could look at something like pain as too much voltage through the wiring. And so I can find, let's say your shoulder hurts, I can find the magnetic component of that electrical jam up, use my tuning fork like a magnet in the magnetic field and adjust the magnetic field, which then changes the way electricity is moving through the body, which shows me that the magnetic field is primary.
Right. Would it be fair to say that they are intrinsic upon one another? Like you can't have one without the other?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think so. I think that they're two sides of the same coin. What's that?
Yeah.
So this is the visual representation of what you just said. This says magnetizer and demagnetizer. This is absolutely what you just described, Eileen, is an actual real thing. And this is how it works. Let's say you're working in your lab and you have screws that you want to hold on to the end of your screwdriver. You will just put it here and just do this. I know, sorry. That was a very, but that's how it works. I realize what that looks like, but that's exactly what you do. You just in and out, in and out, in and out.
Field part.
And it magnetizes the tip of your screwdriver. If you don't want that, you go here and you do the same thing and it demagnetizes it. So can you actually magnetize and demagnetize a tool? Absolutely. So when you said that you use magnets to move around other magnetic fields, there's a physical representation. It actually happens.
Yeah.
Ben, can you explain why that works for smooth brain people like me?
I can. Let me pull this out and it'll. Okay. So inside of this is just a little bar magnet. It sits right there. Okay. Now, if you could see, give me 10 seconds.
10 seconds. I'm counting.
Oh, shit, where is it?
Quite the lab he has there.
Yeah,
you haven't even
I think
seen
he's
the
up to
10 of them.
16 monitors now.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, damn it. Where is it? Oh, here it is. Here it is. Sorry, kids. Okay, this is a magnetic field viewer. If you hold a magnet up to it, you can see the magnetic field.
Ooh, I've seen
Okay.
that one.
Yeah. So you can see that's not very homogeneous. That's not a very good magnet. It's supposed to be very, very smooth, like that.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, that glare is horrible.
No, I can
Light.
see it.
Yeah.
Like a peacock
Okay.
or something.
So what you're seeing there on the magnetic field viewer is one of the poles. And what it doesn't show are the flux lines, the lines that, whenever you draw a magnet in a textbook, it shows lines going around it.
The magnetic rope.
So the magnetic field lines in this aperture are going one direction, or let's see, they're all going like this, okay?
Right.
So when you put it in this way, the magnetic field lines intersect with your tool 90 degrees different than when you do it here.
Ah.
That's so it adjusts, and this is the story, it adjusts the orientation in your tool so that it become magnetized or not. But it's just the way that they intersect the flux lines. They either intersect them parallel or perpendicular.
So
And
parallel
just doing
versus
that motion.
perpendicular is what decides whether or not it's magnetized.
Yep, that's it.
Now I want to take a tuning fork and stick it in there and see what happens.
Magnetizing a tuning fork may subtly affect its sound and make it responsive to magnetic fields, potentially altering its behavior or enabling new applications.
Is the tuning fork male?
The tuning fork is vibration in a plasma. And any vibration in a plasma generates electromagnetic charge.
Jeffrey Drum.
The human body is a bioplasma. Our atmosphere is a weak plasma. The air isn't just air, it's charged, right? Especially if we go to the beach, lots of free ions, or we go in the forest, right? That all speaks to our atmosphere being a plasma, which is something that's really overlooked. Mm-hmm. And again, intentionally, when we look back on these old buildings, it's clear that they were ether harvesters, that they were accumulating and condensing the free energy, the charge that's in our atmosphere. So because they don't want us to know that free energy and electricity is all around us, it's been hidden from us. Same thing with our bodies being electric. Most of us never learned we have an electrical system.
Yeah.
Right? And to me, the light that is your electrical system, that when it's in you generates a torus shape where your body is actually here in the middle and your electromagnetic field surrounds you, right? So that this is even what, there you go. I would say that our body's electrical system is the same thing that we call our soul, because when you die, your light goes out.
Yep.
So, and people have been weighed before and after death, and they lose just a little bit of mass. And many people have actually seen a cloud of light coming out of people when they die, and the light goes out. That is your body's electrical system. So to me, the biofield really bridges this whole science and spirituality thing in a very neat, matter-of-fact kind of way.
And you'll notice
That's really cool.
Returning to equilibrium, I guess. My friend Norm is your greatest fan, and he is convinced of the Tartarian conspiracy, where all these buildings used to have these bronze domes and be conducting electricity. I haven't looked too much into it myself. I do love conspiracies, but I haven't looked all that much into it.
Yeah, they were also making use of mercury and the fact that mercury spins in the presence of an electromagnetic field, and that this is also generative of electricity.
So
Mercury Vortex Engine. What's the name of that Indian religious book? The
the Bhagavad Gita.
Bhagavad Gita. Yeah, they describe the Mercury vortex engine in that. It's the same one Bob Lazar talks about when he's describing his UFOs he was working on. One wonders. What I love about the electric universe is that we've got archaeology so far, we've got cosmology, we've got biology, all of these independent
nuclear
people,
chemistry,
all these people that are independent, working in their own field and finding the exact same processes that relate them to everyone else's field. That, to me, is how reality should work.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's fractal, right? And it does make sense. But I have to tell you that Don Scott did not approve of me being on the stage with Electric Universe. In his mind, this is totally not related, and his own stigma around it stopped him from seeing the fractal connection of everything that I was describing and how it absolutely relates to the premises of the Electric Universe.
And
did he come up?
You know what's? Oh, I just had a thought that was gonna, and it left. Wow, that train of thought just vanished. Oh well, go ahead. Darn it! It was
the
something
slinky.
about Don Scott. It was a slinky. That was a total distraction. That was a great distraction. Goodness sakes.
Yeah, Don didn't approve, but Wall did, thankfully. And it was because of Wall that I found my way into Electric Universe. Because back in 2009 was when I first discovered plasma, where at the time I was trying to understand the phenomena I was encountering around the human body with my tuning forks. Like, it didn't make any sense to me that when a tuning fork passes through the field, I was encountering what felt like mass or resistance or stuff. And I was like, well, what if this is stuff? Like, what is the stuff? Like, what are we going to call this stuff? I really didn't know. And then my son came to dinner one night and he said, did you know there's a fourth state of matter called plasma? And I was like, solid, liquid, gas. No. Like, somehow I missed a whole state of matter. And so, and then later in the conversation, we were talking about space, and my husband was like, space is an empty vacuum. And I said, no, you know what? I read somewhere recently that space actually has stuff in it. And so I went and I looked up space is not a vacuum and discovered plasma. And that took me down this plasma rabbit hole that went on for months and months and led me to electric universe theory and helped me to really formulate my hypothesis about the electrical system of the body. And I reached out to Wall and I explained to him what I had going on. And he completely took me under his wing. He helped work with me on my thesis, my papers, my book, to make sure that everything I was sharing like had his seal of approval. I even visited him in Australia and spent a few times at his home with his family. Yeah.
Wow.
And so that was I was sad that we lost Walt because he really brought so much. Yeah.
He really did. And it turns out he'd kill your enemies for you too.
Really?
There was another member of the Electric Universe, Ben Davidson from Suspicious Observers, who was very involved in the Electric Universe, and then did a 180. And one of his things he said is that Wal Thornhill killed somebody, and just started spreading. You're just like, I know exactly.
We got to get him on. I've got to hear that story.
We got to hear that story. I don't know, but whoever
it was, I'm sure they had it coming.
Oh man.
Well, I had heard that Ben went rogue somehow, but I never heard that was what was going on.
There's so many Bens in the Electric Universe, it's just drives to crazy me. There's Ben Gedlow, Ben Davidson, me. I know there's another one.
We can just call you McGonagall if you want.
I remember the thought that just left my head about what you said about Dawn rejecting your idea. What's really sad is that, as I explained before, you and I, well, at least I was really resistive to your ideas as well. But then I started listening to basically everything that you put out, every video that you ever did. And one thing that you kept bringing up that I really respect, and people really need to know this, when you say you're skeptical, you're not just blowing smoke. you detailed in a couple of your presentations how you said this can't be right, but then you did what every good scientist does. You're like, well, let's just test this. And you would test it and test it and test it. You're like, until the evidence just avalanche. You're like, okay, I don't fully understand this, but I can't deny it anymore. I mean, if that's not the perfect example of the scientific method, I don't know what is.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So, sorry, Dawn.
no,
She followed it. She followed it.
It's true. I have absolutely followed the scientific method. In fact, I even did a presentation at the Society for Scientific Exploration at Yale back in 2017 on applying the scientific method to the biofield anatomy hypothesis. And I went through like how I'd followed all the steps, and I tested and tested again. And then I've trained over 3,500 people with my team. So we have thousands of tuners out there testing the hypothesis and getting the same outcomes for the past 14 years now. So
you can't just toss that data out and say, "Oh, that's woo. That's no good." It's like, no, that's actual data. Yes, you can analyze it, but just to throw it out,
unscientific woo.
Well, and honestly, like I think at this point, like everyone would agree that we have electric current running through our body, right? Your heartbeat's electric. Everybody knows that. Your brain waves, your blood, all of that. Anything that has electric current running through it has a magnetic field around it. Okay, so this is basic science. The human body is no different. You can't argue with that. That is science we all learned in grade school. And
right.
So this whole idea of like, oh, we don't know what the energy is in energy medicine or how it works is complete nonsense. Of course we know what the energy is in energy medicine. It's electricity. Like, hello, it's that simple.
So there's another thing to that, and a lot of times what scientists will say, and I'm sure you've run across this too, is they said, well, we can't measure it. It's like, hold on. There's two things. You're familiar with the Sapphire Project?
Sure.
Do you know what that is?
I've been there.
Oh, you have?
Yeah, I'm friends with him too. What's his name? Marty?
Oh,
Monty?
Michael Claridge.
Yeah, Monty and Michael Claridge. Yeah, I visited Monty's lab in Toronto, outside of Toronto.
That's right, because you're close to there.
Not too far, but I was teaching a class there, and so Monty invited me to come take a look at the star in a jar they got.
Oh man, I did not know that. You need to elaborate on that. Can I just bring up this and then let you go into that?
Sure.
So when they put the Langmuir probe through the double layers toward the anode and it evaporated, sorry kids, Monty said that they had to rewrite plasma physics because 3 people did the equations on that, and none of them could tell that was going to happen, which means that we don't know about energy fields. We don't have a complete understanding. There are parts of it that we don't know. You said earlier that we have plasma in dark mode that actually is there and it does something. I just did an experiment in my lab that I shared on social media that completely demonstrated that. It was just a candle next to a discharging electrode. This would go zap, zap, zap every few seconds. But if you put a candle next to it, a lit candle, the dark mode plasma in between it absorbed the charge like a sponge. But you couldn't see it. And so this thing, the little electrodes here stopped going zap, 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 even though you were applying electricity to it. You just sit there and crank it, and every time you'd crank it 2 times, it would go zap. And you light the candle, just zap, zap, and nothing. You would get nothing. So, Eileen, you're absolutely right. Dark mode plasma is all around us. It has absolute feature, structures, elements. I can't say that enough, but you nailed it.
Steve said it best. Nobody understands this stuff.
No, and I think the language that we use doesn't help. The language that we're using to describe electricity is confusing. So that's part of the problem as well. And then, Maxwell originally created 20 equations in a very mystical way. He had deep insight into the true nature of the movement of charge. And those 20 equations were whittled down to 4, and that's the reality we live in. And so there are 16 other dimensions of understanding electricity that have been willfully eliminated. Doesn't mean they're gone. They're still there. If they're not part of our lexicon, then they're not part of our reality. And so then we always go into this, we can't measure it, we don't understand it. And it's just excuses to keep a mechanistic paradigm. That's all it is. It's not science.
No. Hertz.
Thanks to the... Oh, sorry, Matt.
Hertz kept all 20 of them for his theory, if I recall.
I actually, about 3 months ago, thanks to the internet, looked them up. I found all of the original 20 equations, and I'm not a mathematician, but I started reading through them, and I had enough to understand a lot of it. And then you start reading about it, and what happened is what they were the XYZ equations for every aspect. And then Oliver Heaviside came along and said, well, we can't measure this, so therefore it's irrelevant.
Right.
And shortened them down to the 4. I was like, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
I mean, that just because we can't measure it now doesn't mean that they're inconsequential. It was just so frustrating.
That's how you know
that.
It's a scam. Same with Halton Arp, like, oh, look, we're showing plasma bridges connecting quasars. Let's just throw that away. Yeah, and now NASA has discovered one and shown pictures of it, and that verified Halton Arp's theory, but Halton Arp didn't have a predictive model framework for his observation, so they cast it out. Well, he sure does now. He's got the electric universe. So we know space isn't expanding. We know that there's energy being transferred between stars. So it'd be nice if the mainstream would update a little bit.
Well, they are starting to, because, back when I first discovered plasma and I started talking about it, I started giving presentations around 2012. I would ask my audience, has anybody ever heard of plasma? Not blood plasma, but the other plasma? And nobody would raise their hand. Nobody. Everyone was like, no. And now almost everybody raises their hand because somehow over the last 5 years or so, NASA started sneaking it in. They started all of a sudden talking about plasma without ever giving any kind of introduction or anything. They, all of a sudden, hot gas became plasma without so much as a by your leave. They just started sliding it in there. And then I just saw some article that was posted online about how there's a new theory about plasma in space. I was like, oh, come on, people. Why has there been such an outright rejection of the electric universe when it makes so much sense? I'm not understand that. It's outside of the institutions that
it's outside of funding.
Yeah.
Ego and money.
Right.
Yeah.
We're all
right. I mean, they've got egg on their face. They clearly have egg on their face. They know they have egg on their face. We know they have egg on their face. So what do? They just kind of do what you just said. They slightly start to add it as if they've always known it.
As if exactly. As if always. It's true. Yeah.
It preserves their ego.
But, I just want to come back to about this not being able to measure the magnetic field. That's also patently false. They created a device in the 50s called a squid magnetometer that was able to detect the magnetic field of the heart by some accounts from up to 12 feet away. Okay, so there's been stuff to measure this. It's just a story that we can't measure it. Yeah. It's not truth.
Yeah, my opinion, and the reason, some people are critical of my Thunderbolts because I really like to make fun of the mainstreamers, but I think it's a scam. I think they goddamn know that it's electric. And I think that they're pretending it's not. And I suspect it's got something to do with the production of energy. Squid magnetometer.
Squid magnetometer.
Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Did I write it down right? Because
I'm
going to look that up.
Conductive quantum interference device or something like that.
You have a flux capacitor in there somewhere?
It seems like you should.
So our first interview on the first podcast was with Steve Smith, who's also he did most of the T-pods, the Thunderbolt pictures of the day. And he just threw out a little fun thing that I didn't know about, that when lightning goes off in Jupiter's atmosphere, our ionosphere here on Earth vibrates, resonates with it.
Rings like a bell.
Rings like a bell. So you zap, and all of a sudden, hundreds of thousands of miles away, millions of miles away, ours resonates. It's like, wait a minute. If we can measure that, why is the heart monitor woo? That doesn't make any sense. Well, and this actually, Eileen, it answers one of the questions that I've heard you talk about. And in fact, I think you and I talked about it when I said, when you go praying with your tuning fork, how does that transfer all the way to me 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 miles away? and I think you said something like, I don't know, but
No,
we
I do
actually,
know.
okay, please go ahead, because I don't remember. Tell everybody.
You can do it over the phone?
Yeah, I could do
You
it
did it over the phone.
I can.
Could you fix me real quick?
Maybe we'll get there, but let me explain it first. Okay, so for years, people asked me if I could do this work at a distance. And I always said no, very arrogantly, very skeptically, very confidently, no. This is sound waves on the body, it's physics. There is no way I'm doing this at a distance, right? And then when I was working on tuning the human biofield, I had the good fortune of befriending a fellow by the name of Dr. Carl Merritt, who's very knowledgeable about subtle energy. And he also helped me with my thesis and my book. I was so lucky to have those two guys, honestly. And then after us working on this together for a while, he said to me one day, he's like, do you want to try doing this at a distance on me? And even though I'm skeptical, right, I'm very much a scientist. I love experiments. I just like, my favorite thing to say is, let's try this and see what happens. And so I was willing to give it a try. So at this point in like 2013, I think it was, I had mapped the biofield in its entirety. I completely understood that when I was passing a fork through somebody's field, I could read all of that information. Like, this is a car accident, I figured out all the ages. That basically your biofield is your memory bank. And so if your body's in here, this area all around here is holding your memories. And it's holding your memories in a very specific format. And that is what I decoded. And so if I'm going through your field and I hit a wonky spot, I can tell you exactly what age it is, exactly what it's related to, because it's all vibrational language that I've decoded. And so, Dr. Merritt and I did not have an open line of communication. We were not on the phone. We were connecting just by intention. And so I approached this treatment table in my treatment room as if he was on it. And I started to move the forks through my field, through his field and my field, because I'm standing there. And much to my amazement, all of the same patterns of information that would show up when someone was on the table showed up. And so I went through and I read his field and I took notes, all the things that I figured out, like the personality of his mother. He had a head injury when he was 5. He had inflammation in this joint. This organ wasn't firing quite right. His father had this personality. These ages were super stressful. Like, all the things that I can tell about someone. I can read someone like a book. And then we got on the phone and I went through my notes and I told him everything. And he said, Eileen, that is all exactly correct. And I felt a state change while you were working. I feel lighter, and I tested my resting blood sugar before and after, and there is a beneficial difference. And I was like, oh my God, like, now I have to eat crow because this is possible, right? So then I had a friend in Australia, a fellow by the name of Brendan Murphy, and I was like, okay, it works from Vermont to California. Will it work all the way to Australia? And so I did it with Brendan. Again, no open line of communication. Same thing. Could read it, could adjust it. He felt the difference, right? So after that, and after a few more, I was like, okay, well, if this works, there has to be a natural law that explains it. Otherwise, it wouldn't work, right? So what is the natural law that enables this to work at a distance? What I ended up coming up with was ether. They hide plasma, they really hide ether. And they've gone out of their way to remove ether from our cosmological story. But if ether is the ground state, the ocean of clear light that all waves arise in and move through, right? The dielectricity, it splits into the positive and negative charges. The one becomes the two, and the two become the many, right? So ether is the response. It's not quantum entanglement, because that leaves out the medium. It's resonance in the ether. And every single one of us has had the experience of catching the vibe of a loved one, that feeling their energy arise in us, and then moments later we get a text or a phone call. How does that work? It works the same way. It's resonance in the ether. It's all one. There's no separation. My field is everywhere because the ether is holographic. So from this little bit of ether right here, I can stick a fork in it and I can conjure up with my mind and my intention whatever it is that I'm reading right there. And it works over and over and over and over and over again. And to me, this idea of resonance in the ether, that we're all antennas, that this information is all present, is just very logical and elegant. When we start going about quantum entanglement and this particle on this side of the universe spins and that particle on the other side of the universe spins, that's nonsense. How do you know what a particle on the other side of the universe is doing? I can't believe that people even use that to describe anything, because it's one of the most unscientific things you could possibly say.
I know. I remember reading that exact same thing, and that was my first question. It's like, how do they know what it's doing over there?
You don't.
It's just a stupid statement. It's
Yeah,
like,
it's a stupid
believe me,
statement.
I'm wearing a lab coat, so therefore I am correct.
Yeah. And the whole idea of the vacuum of space is incorrect. We know that the space is not a vacuum. And how on earth would you have an atmosphere that's only bounded by an electromagnetic boundary, and somehow there's a vacuum on the other side without any kind of wall? That doesn't make any sense either. Right?
The flat earthers bring up that argument, and they're not wrong. That's
They're
the
not
thing.
wrong.
The flat earthers are one group of people that actually are thinking in the right way. They're asking the right questions. They're not thinking the right way, but they're asking the right questions, and they do ask some absolutely appropriate questions, and that's one of them.
Yeah.
I never think they're right.
Well,
Yeah,
I want to say that I have some very well-respected colleagues who have done a lot of research and have landed in that camp. And they have invited me to do that research. And I have gone down that rabbit hole and I have studied both sides. And I will honestly say at this juncture that I am not a flat earther, but I am a globe skeptic. I am a globe skeptic. And it comes back to the fact that I am so skeptical, and that I am only going to say I know something is true if I truly know it. The truth is that I don't know the shape of the realm. I don't.
If you
what do you
start
got?
a flight from Queensland to Perth, you can get there on a 747 on one tank of fuel. However, if you flatten the Earth map out, Queensland and Perth become on opposite sides of the map, in which case you need 4 tanks of fuel to get from one to the other. So that's my main one of many. But
I think where I landed is that there's logic on both sides. And to me, when there's an argument going on, nobody's landed a slam dunk because the argument keeps going on, then either neither one is right or both are right.
well, I
And
think what the
I'm
flat
all
Earth
for a
guys-
third option, whatever that may be.
I think what the flat Earth guys are people who haven't discovered electric universe yet. They know something's wrong and they're right because the standard model's garbage. And we live in such an age where we're Greek peasants again, looking out across the sea, wondering if they're sea monsters, because we don't know what we can believe. Stephen Hawking and like 30 of his buddies were hanging out on Epstein Island. I mean, you don't do that for free.
No.
They wanted something from him. I don't know what. There's been no investigation. But my point is you can't trust the information coming out of mainstream anything. And that means that we're in a new frontier.
That's right. And that's really how I feel, is that I've really learned to not trust anything that is mainstream, like anything. Mainstream is still going to tell you don't have a biofield. I know you have a biofield. I've had my hands in biofields for 29 years. Like, I know, right? That's something I can stand by. I'm like, there is definitely a field here. And I'm not skeptical about that, right? But the mainstream will tell you up and down that it's nonsense. So I think you're right. Like so where does that leave us, right? It's like, okay, well, I can't trust what I've been told. The flat earthers don't quite seem to have it. The globers are just bullies. And so and electric universe is regularly overlooked. Right. Yep. And so where does that leave us? I think it leaves us all in a place of not really knowing,
Well, yeah, we're back to
really
philosophy.
knowing. Yeah.
Well, I don't say that we don't really know, because Eileen, I think you do know, and you know that you know, but that shared knowledge is such a tiny group. And so it kind of feels like we're alone because you know your thing, Matt knows his stuff, I know my stuff, but the group that also knows that is pretty small. And we're social creatures. We like to feel included, for the simple reason that if we're included in a group, the likelihood that something's going to attack and kill us and we're going to die reduces. And so we like to feel as a part of a group. And so when we think, actual think, it puts us outside of that group, and it's a little uncomfortable, and it really takes people with a strong character to think, to see, to reason, and to vocalize and to stand out. So when you say we don't really know, I think we do. It's just we don't get the satisfaction of the group knowing it as well.
I think we're entering an age where the most prolific kind of view seems to be arising is simulation theory.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are buying into it, and I think that I know I am. And I think that the only model of cosmology, or the only theory of everything that fits simulation theory is electric universe.
Yes. I mean, no matter what, it's an electrical simulation.
Yes.
No matter what, like that, I can rest in.
Well, so my own personal thoughts on what reality is that we're probably living in the subatomic structure of something bigger. I think it's a big brain. Who knows? But when we look into space, I think that's what we're seeing. I think that galaxies are atoms. I think it's the same process inside of us as we are inside of whatever we're in. The Russian doll hypothesis.
Yeah. Fractals.
How can it not be?
Yeah. Now, if you look at life like a server of a video game, like take any video game, like Skyrim, for example. If you're playing Skyrim, you're this character and you've got this whole world around you that appears to have volume. And it appears to have dimensions, like it takes you a long time to run from one side of the map to the other, just like Earth. But really, it all fits inside of, whatever, like a microchip, right? There is no physical space there. It's all an illusion.
Right.
And really, it's all run by the same series of scripts, right? Well, one of the things we talk about all the time on here is you have this idea that, I'm looking at the physical processes of Matt Finn. I can hear my thoughts. I can feel the itch on my arm. So can you. But the one thing we all have in common is that we're not necessarily that clump of biological activity going on. We're more the awareness that's watching it. And I think, we talked to Andy Hall about taking ayahuasca. And you go outside of yourself and you get that incredible feeling of oneness. And you realize that awareness that is watching through our eyes, I suppose, it's probably all the same awareness. It's probably whatever's running this server. You could call it God or whatever. I don't know. But it would make sense in that faculty that if you're doing a tuning fork on me and I'm 3,000 miles away, we're actually the same consciousness. And we're actually in the exact same place. We just have this holographic illusion of distance.
Yes.
So in that philosophy, it seems like it would make a lot of sense that you could do a distant,
which you could do a remote, exactly,
section, or astral travel, or anything else. You're not navigating the world; you're navigating the mind of God.
That's right. Yeah, but it's all a field of consciousness.
Yes.
Eileen, can I ask you about the different frequencies of tuning forks? Because you sell them, you have a bunch of them on display behind you. Why do we need different frequencies of tuning forks?
Well, you could say on one level we really don't. Like there's one fork that I can do entire treatments with. My sonic slider, 93.96 hertz, is a weighted fork. You can't hear it really, but it's designed to use on the body. But I can also use it in the field to do field adjustments. So you could get away with just one fork and this multi-purpose. Like this is the one I carry in my bag everywhere I go. So if I run into somebody and they're in pain or, fussing about something, I can pull out my fork and help them out.
Looks good.
Pretty short order. What's that?
Looks good for self-defense too.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes TSA is a little worried about that, but we've had to train.
What frequency is that? Because I bought the 174 because you said in one of your podcast, that was your go-to, and now
Yeah,
it's this
so
one?
that one is as far as like field combing, and I'll explain that in a moment. So this is 174. The sonic slider is the Schumann resonance, the average of the Schumann resonance, 7.83 hertz times 12. So it's 93.96 hertz. And it is a particularly pleasing vibration. It's sort of universally pleasing. Animals, plants, little kids, old people. Like the sonic slider is a fork that you can just use and use. But whereas something else like this, like the 144 weighted, like you can activate, you use it a little bit and then you're done. You're just like, okay, enough of that. But the sonic slider you can just keep going with. And I think, there's just something about the Schumann resonance that the body is like, yeah, I dig that. It's natural. And then something about this 12th harmonic that just really is good. Whereas the 11th harmonic, the 13th harmonic, those both are terrible frequencies that don't feel good at all. I, as an inventor, have invented dozens and dozens and dozens of prototypes. In fact, I just came up with another one. It's on its way here. I use them a whole bunch and decide if they're useful, how they're useful, what I think of them. So basically what I've narrowed it down to is I use 5 weighted forks and 5 unweighted forks. And between these 10 frequencies, I can do everything that I want to do. Tuning forks are the sort of thing that people can go kind of overboard with because there's unlimited frequencies that you can come up with, get all these points after the decimal point. You can go a little crazy with them, which is why I very intentionally limit mine. Also, my forks are made out of an alloy that nobody else has. This is an alloy that took me 1.5 years to create with my manufacturer because what I was finding was that ordinary tuning forks didn't stand up to this biofield tuning field combing process where I'm hunting for traumatic memories that are producing a very dissonant signal in your field. And so when the tuning fork intersects those areas of chaos, the overtones and undertone undulations literally creates micro cracks in the metal, right? So after I blew out a few of the standard ones, my manufacturer was like, these aren't designed to be used the way you're using them. And I was like, well, let's design one that is. And so he made me all of these different alloys, all of these different gauges. And the last man standing is this alloy that we have. And it really produces a tone that's totally different than other tuning forks. So people go to my website and they're like, why are your tuning forks so expensive? Because they're really good, because they're the best. They're made in America. They're high quality. They're made to my standards, which are very high. And you get what you pay for with tools. You want something dumb and cheap, go get it from China. It's not a sound healing tool, right? Yeah. So I guess I'll explain the different frequencies, but let's listen to them. And Matt, where do you have pain?
Where do I have pain?
Yeah.
I'm a manual laborer, so everywhere pretty much.
Do you work with stone?
Back a lot.
Back?
Sometimes I make signs.
Okay. Yeah,
So
that's
most
a
of it
lot
hanging
of...
up ladders, screwing stuff in, and
Okay, I understand.
picking up heavy stuff.
Yeah, I've worked with sign makers before. It's not an easy job. Okay, so the fundamental premise of what sound healing is all about is that it's been used forever on every continent, right? The bells, gongs, chants, singing bowls, right? All the didgeridoo. Its aim is to bring us into a relaxed, alert presence. That's it. Just like, can you show up right here in this moment with no ants in your pants, with no agenda to push, no axe to grind, nothing to fix, nothing to do? We get all like ants in our pants, right? Can you just be chill and fully present? Because that's where healing happens. That's where learning happens. That's where fun happens, right?
That's where you get all your inspiration.
Yeah, if we have PTSD, we've got so much of our circuitry is caught up in past trauma, we're totally not able to show up in the moment, fully present with a clear filter to really perceive what's happening around us. So this is a means to get to back those traumas and the noise and the signal that they've created out of your signal, to improve your signal to noise ratio so that more of you is present. And everybody knows that they have all this potential that they're not accessing, right? Everybody knows that they have some amazing gifts that God has given them. But part of the puzzle of this plane of reality is your gifts have been hidden, you've been traumatized, you're downstream from all this trauma, the plasma's been hidden, the ether's been hidden, the truth of who you are has been hidden, right? And so we have to play the game. We have to go on this journey to see if we can find, resurrect, remember, and share our gifts and our potential. And so, there's all kinds of things that get in the way of that. So this is a simple tool to just help get the noise out so that the who you really are, the amazing, beautiful, brilliant, gifted creatures that we all are, can come to the fore, right? Okay, so, and in order to do that, all we really have to do is relax. Because I've really come to the conclusion that pretty much any disorder or disease that you can think of is tension based. It's a pattern of tension that's inhibiting function in your physiology. And nobody's ever argued. I keep waiting for someone to tell me, like, Eileen, this disorder isn't tension based, but nobody's been ever able to come up with anything that isn't tension based, right? Even toxins, like many of my colleagues are like, toxins is a cause of disease. Well, if you have a robust and resilient system, you're going to be able to metabolize and process toxins. I mean, unless you have like mass exposure, right? We've all been exposed to heavy metal. Why do some people sequester it versus others? And it's tension. Like in my experience, everyone I've ever worked with who was a heavy metal accumulator had the habit of holding in their anger. And so if you think about getting really angry and then holding it in and all the tension across all the membranes that creates in your body, how the heck is your body going to move metals through that kind of tension in a membrane? It's not.
It's not.
No. So let's just go ahead and let's just listen. Like you both listen, and anybody who's watching the podcast, just listen to these forks and let your body's organizing intelligence use the reflection of the sound that's coming through to see if it wants to put you in better order. Because when something is really in order, then you don't have these patterns of tension trying to hold you together because things aren't balanced, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's do
All
it.
right.
Let's do it. I want to see it.
So let's start with 174. Here we go. All right, right off the bat, I have to share this. Matt, you work too hard. You push yourself. Your body says, I'm done, and you push yourself through it. And you kind of do that again and again and again, right? And I can feel that in the reflection of the tone because there's a heaviness here, but there's also like a stubbornness. There's a kind of like, I'm just going to power through kind of vibe going on. Like you don't tolerate weakness in yourself. And so you have expectation that you can just keep going and going and going. Does that make sense?
I got kids.
Yeah, you got kids. I understand. Yeah. But here's the trouble with being a laborer, right? Is that you get to be 50 and over, and that tendency, 55, like your body's going to pay for it. You're not going to be able. All the times that you push through, you are shortening the span of actually being able to do, right? So I want to invite you, just with this feedback, to work smarter, not harder, so that you can keep your body working till you're 70, 80 successfully. Because the habit that you have, just like powering through, and I can hear that in the tone, right, is gonna come around and bite you in the butt as you get older, right? So yeah. All right.
Explore other career paths.
What's that?
I'm exploring other career paths.
You're exploring other career paths, yeah, or I might like delegate more within what you're doing, and not because our culture has corralled us all into this self-sufficient individual thinking, where we kind of think we have to do it all ourselves, and we're not good at delegating, we're not good at asking for help, we're just not good at it. It doesn't even occur to us. I had to get to be 50 before it finally occurred to me that if there was a can I was kicking down the road, I needed to ask for help. I was like, why didn't I think of this before? Instead of beating yourself up for not getting it done or for being a procrastinator, you can just ask for help and find a way to make it easier for yourself, make it happen. So I really want to invite you to notice when your body is saying no or stop, and honor that, and in a creative, resourceful way. Yeah. So even without trying, that, it was very clear to me that the signal that I was hearing was coming from you, and that's the story that it was telling. So
that's also a really interesting point that you said, that it's coming from him, because I'm also hearing this conversation. How do you know it wasn't coming from me?
Because I could feel it radiating with him. I could just
We're both self-employed.
Yeah. Well, partly also Ben has already had a tuning with me. So he's had the experience of it. And in a way, he was kind of energetically holding back. He wasn't trying to make it about him. Whereas you were really open and curious, right? And so it was sort of more just, and I could almost see it in a way. That it was tuning into you and reflecting you. Yeah. Would you agree?
Yes, I would. So I wasn't challenging you. I just wanted you to explain that to other people, because I know, if I were watching the podcast or listening, I'd be like, how did she know that it's Matt and not Ben? And I think that's a perfectly valid question to have.
Yeah, definitely.
And so your answer, if I can summarize it, you said, through feelings.
Yes.
Now, one thing that the materialistic mentality, the male mentality, if you want to say it, really brings up is feelings aren't scientific. And I'm not going to share this whole experience, but I had a really interesting experience a few weeks ago where I learned to trust my feelings. Because I was having this argument with myself, I guess. And I said, well, look, I don't trust feelings as a measure of identifying truth, because feelings change and truth doesn't change. And they said, hold on, name something that you know is true that doesn't change. And I said, well, the sun doesn't change. And they said, wrong. The sun constantly changes. You've seen the pictures of those spicules going up and boop and bap, boop, boop, bap. The sun constantly changes. And I said, yeah, but it's there in the sky every day. It's yes, but it's not the same. And I started thinking about that idea, and wait a minute, our bodies are not the same. Our cells regenerate. And by the time we die, if we live to 80, 90 years old, we don't have an original cell in our body, but we're still the same. I mean, we're still the same person, the same personality, the same features. So I'm oh, wait a minute. So it's okay to trust things that change, because they can change and still remain the same. And in that moment, I learned, and I began to trust that emotional attachments, like what you described, your emotional attachment with Matt, you could feel it, was as valid as anything, this is a thing and I know it's a thing because I can go like this.
Sure.
That was a big watershed moment for me.
Yeah. I think that we've gotten so terribly heady and too many people just spend too much time thinking and not feeling. And tuning is all about listening and feeling. And there's a certain knowing, there's a kind of resonance that when we all have a knowing, when we know what we know, when we know it, right? If you're not sure, you're should I do this or should I do that? Or well, you don't know. So just wait until you have more information. Wait until you know. Don't waste time going back and forth when you don't know. Wait until you know, and you know when you know, right?
Yes, you do. Absolutely.
So feelings do matter. I think that they are creating devices that can read, because every emotion that you produces a particular waveform. And so I can tell any emotion when I'm listening to the forks, like sadness sounds a particular way, anger sounds a particular way, alarm sounds a particular way, depression accents the undertones. You hear this "bleh" in the forks, right? So there's a very objective language. Like when I'm using the forks, this is not intuitive or even feeling based. This is pattern recognition based on many, many hours of exposure where I know that sound means that. That sound is you were just T-boned in a car accident. That's alarm, right? I mean, there's even this very specific sound, and this is so random. There's a very specific place in your field and sound in your field where you asked to go to the bathroom in first grade and the teacher didn't let you and you peed at your desk. Like, I know exactly what that sound is. I know exactly where it is. And it's kind of fun to find it in random people because I'm like, did you pee at your desk in first grade? And they're all like, how the heck did you know that? I'm like, it's not intuition. It is absolutely science that sound in that spot means that. So this is a science, a feeling-based science, because it's a language. It's a language. And it's a universal language. In fact, even plants and pets vibrate in the same vibrational language. The dog doesn't just smell your fear. The dog feels your vibe of fear, which has a pulse to it. And it knows that's fear because it feels the same way when it's afraid. And even plants speak the same language. So there is this universal language of vibration that we all know and that we're all responding to all the time. Everybody's had the experience of getting a bad vibe off of somebody.
Yeah.
Right? You're going to tell me that that's not scientific or that's not valid? Like any human will be like, I've gotten bad vibes off people. Like that exists. Therefore, there is a science to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's try another frequency. You want to try another frequency? All right, we'll see where this one goes, and we'll just be wide open. All right, so this is one of my newer forks is 144 hertz, and I created this during COVID, after COVID, because with COVID, like all of a sudden, this thick veil of fear seemed to descend on the collective, and what I was finding was that the 174 wasn't busting the nut. Like it wasn't getting through what I needed it to. And so I needed a bigger gun. And so this is what I created in response to that. And it really does the trick. It gets in a little deeper, it shakes a little harder. So let's just see what we notice with this one. Okay, I'll do one more. I'm really sending this to your shoulders, Matt. Actually, one more. Good. All right. What did you notice with that one?
Well, my shoulders kind of relaxed a little bit, but I guess I was probably trying to help it along.
Well, and that's okay because that's part of the equation. But yeah, I felt your shoulders relax. Like on that third strike, I felt this sort of release start to happen, right up in here. Right. And so, of course, you helped it along. It's your organizing intelligence that's doing it. Right. And so if you're like, oh, my body's starting to relax, I'm going to consciously join in and do that, then it will.
I do a lot of binaural beats and meditate, and so I've gotten pretty good at being able to relax my muscles. Like even if I have a bad back, like when you can't turn your neck, I've been able to actually relax that just by meditating and thinking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's so much the work of Joe Dispenza, right? It's just like you can use your mind to do so much. In fact, I was just thinking about this morning because there are so many devices, like the biohackers and have come up with so many devices and frequency machines and this, that, and the other. And I think in a way that that's worshiping false idols because our minds are so powerful. They're so much more powerful than any device, especially our minds connected to the one mind. And then acoustic sound is just a really simple thing. We're self-tuning instruments. We're designed to be in tune. The ground state of the cosmos is harmony. The ground state of our being is harmony. And so just in the air we breathe, in the sun, in our own voices, we have the capacity to make ourselves ill or make ourselves well. And this whole idea that some $30,000 device is going to save you is, I think, barking up the wrong tree, personally.
I didn't like that sound.
The 144? No, it's not really pleasant.
It made me feel really agitated, and
Yeah.
it seemed like you hit it like 5 times. I could swear that I was hearing static in the sound, and then the last strike, it was gone. I'm like, the hell is that?
Yeah. No, the 144, this is what I say about the 144 is this fork that's like going to tell you all the things that are wrong with you. This fork is very reflective of like all of our dissonances. And it's very different character than what did I do with my 222? Because I have another fork that's a completely different animal. Is it this one? Yeah. So let's listen to this one. This one is 222. This one is pleasing. This one is like, if the 144 is like, these are all the things that are wrong with you and I'm going to help you fix them. The 222 is, I love you just the way you are. And so see if you notice that.
Definitely better sounding.
Yeah, it's just pleasing, right? It's just like, oh.
That 144 really got under my skin.
The 144 does.
Just
But when you keep working with it, like when you keep going, because I could have kept going with it. When you keep going with it, it does find its like harmony. It's got this like blah that is actually pleasing, but it can make some of the wildest sounds. Like of any of the forks that I have, it can go really highly distorted. And so if I'm trying to like demonstrate to somebody about how the tuning forks reflect what is present, I'll use the 144 because it really shows you. Like if you're on my table here and we're going through and I find a spot, because people are like, well, you know, how subtle is it that you detect these changes? I'm like, it's not really subtle. Like you can hear, especially if I'm in a very specific memory. Like I was working on a friend one day, I was using that fork and I came into his field and it made the wonkiest sound, like so much heavy distortion. And he said, wow, what is that? And so I plotted it on the timeline because the outer boundary is birth and close to the body is now. And everything in between is equidistant. So if somebody's 40, I'm going to find memories from when they were 20, 3 feet away. The edge of the field is about 6 feet away, right? So that's how the memories are stored. So I plotted it on the timeline and I was like, okay, this is around 18. And he said, oh, that's when I went through the windshield of a car. And I was like, well, that's what this sounds like. It really sounded terrible. So it's not hard to discern. I mean, really, pretty much, it's very easy to learn to become a tuner because even you feel it in your fingertips when you're combing through the field and you hit something that's wonky, like the fork vibrates more, it vibrates differently. And so even if you can't distinguish the difference in tone, you can feel the change in vibration in your fingertips. So and all you do is hang out in the wonky spot and the body just uses the reflection. It's like a mirror. It reflects back to the body, how it's out of order. It's a metronome. It's giving it a steady rhythm, right? Because everything is rhythmic in the cosmos. And then it becomes a magnet where the energy that was trapped in that incoherent vibrational pattern, that soul loss, if you will, then I'm able to move it I'm like, this is the magnetic field adjustment where I use the tuning fork like a magnet and bring it back to the midline of the torus where it goes back into circulation. And that's why people say they feel lighter, because this stuff in the field is your emotional baggage that you're carrying around. In fact, there's a concept that I came across recently called the semi-Dirac fermion. Have you guys ever heard of that?
No.
No. Well, apparently
I've heard of those words.
Yeah, the fermion it's like a quantum physics concept of a particle, but there are no particles, I don't think. Like everything is waves. But anyway, they call it a particle, and they've observed that it only exhibits mass when it's traveling in the wrong direction. So as long as this node of energy is traveling along its correct path, it has no mass. But if it diverges and goes perpendicular to its path, it accumulates mass. It takes on mass. And so when I learned about that, I was like, I think that's what's going on in the field, because energy is supposed to always be circulating. But then when we have a trauma and we have a pattern, a tension response, and then that's in our memory bank, energy doesn't circulate freely through that. It gets all tangled up in a knot, and it feels like it has mass. When I hit it with a tuning fork, I'm like, it's got mass. And so the tuning fork is almost like a comb that's combing out a tangle in hair. And then all of a sudden that weight, that mass lets go, and the energy goes back into circulation. And without exception, and you also said this, Ben, people who have a tune-up always say the same thing. They say, I feel lighter. I feel lighter. And I think it's because of that phenomenon of massless particles developing mass when they get stuck.
Yeah, like what is mass?
Yeah, charge. It's accumulation of charge.
It's got something to do with layers. Like,
I think so.
Andy Hall was talking about how when these supersonic winds hit regular air, it's almost like they hit a solid wall and they deflect.
Yeah.
Right. They do the shock diamonds in the exhaust of jets. Those shock diamonds occur because they're actually reflecting against the boundary of the flame and the regular atmosphere. You're like, you think about that, you're like, wow.
What
really?
happens when you reach out and touch a wall? Like, why does your finger stop? There's no mass there. It's just tiny amount of mass.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, as I understand it, and this kind of goes back to Walter Russell, who Wall was not a fan of, which I find interesting, because I think that a lot of what Walter Russell says makes sense, and I didn't quite understand why Wall didn't dig him. But that essentially, mass it's spun light, it's spun ether. It's ether that has spun itself in and in and in on itself, and because it's spun, it is now creating mass. Because it's not just flowing and being massless, as it spins into itself in layers upon layers upon layers, it accumulates that density of charge, which to our senses, right, is mass.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Oh man, so many good questions. So many good questions. You said you've been doing this for 25 years. Is that right?
29. I picked up my first works in 1996.
What made you pick them up for the first time?
Logic.
Really?
Yeah, I had learned that everything was vibration, and that resonated for me. It made sense. And then I came across the concept of vibrational medicine using color, sound, and music for healing. And I was like, well, that makes sense. If I'm vibration, treating vibration with vibration is logical. And then I got a catalog that had a set of tuning forks for healing in it. And I was like, well, that's logical. And so at the time I was doing massage therapy part-time, and I just started experimenting with them, just playing. And then I've never stopped. I never stopped experimenting. I never, ever have really looked at it as a job or a career, or it's always felt like research to me. And I'm the kind of person that gets bored very easily. And I have never, ever gotten bored. They're never boring. They are always interesting. They're always teaching me something. They are always leading me down paths that I didn't expect. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm right with you. I get bored very, very quickly. But yeah, when you find your right thing, it's not boring anymore.
Yeah. No, I mean
which is
they led me to electric universe. They led me to this whole biofield anatomy hypothesis. They led me to writing 2 books. They've shown me so much about the human psyche. I think this has really been the biggest gift, is that as I started to understand that the biofield was mind and that ailments are a consequence of an imbalanced mind, and I started to, I've combed my forks through thousands and thousands of minds and observed all of these different patterns of imbalance that we can get ourselves into. And I've always been like, oh, wow, I do that. I do that too. Like, oh God, I do that as well. And so it's been such a great mirror to help me to become sort of more coherent, more orderly, more healthy. They've really brought me to a place understanding electric health and moving from this chemical mechanical lens. When I was in that world without plasma and ether, I was really stuck. I was stuck in poverty consciousness. I was stuck in chronic pain. I was stuck in a variety of low-level maladies. I was stuck in marital discord and mommy rage. And I had spent thousands of dollars and many, many hours in the world of self-help. Like, I had invested time and energy, and I was not fit, and I was not happy, and I was not abundant. I was like, this stuff isn't working. What's wrong with me? And then when plasma and ether came into the equation, and the concepts of syntropy and levity as well, right? Because we're only taught about entropy. We're not taught about the opposite of entropy, which is, I use the term syntropy because I hate negative entropy. It's such a dumb word.
yeah, neg entropy is silly.
Like dumb. And levity, sound waves fall upward, right? Like we're taught that everything is pulling us down and ripping us apart. And that's how people go through their lives, in this dark, disconnected, meaningless cosmology that we're taught. And so when my cosmology expanded to incorporate these extra concepts, I've been able to solve all those problems.
It's certainly
That's awesome. That's really cool.
It certainly cheers you up to know that space isn't a soulless void that's going to collapse in on itself eventually and go out. The Big Bang and CDM models are some of the most depressing cosmological models you can imagine. And I got to think that's probably on purpose.
It is. It absolutely is. Because I didn't know, one of the things that I say is like the best self-help book I ever read, the book that ended all self-help books for me, was not a self-help book. It was Don Scott's book, The Electric Sky.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah. And I'm
awesome.
sure he's appalled to hear me say that. But I was like, oh my God, it's all electric. It's all connected. And this low-level angst I've been feeling my whole life, and I don't even know what it is, it's the cosmological story in the background of darkness, disconnection, randomness. There's no light in it. And so we're all off kind of like trying to find the light, And when I discovered electric universe theory and I understood that the same light that like powered the stars, powered the sun was what was in me, I felt connected. I was like, the song of the universe is ringing in my cells. Like, I am connected to everything. And then I didn't need to search anymore because I understood that the intentional, dark, miserable cosmological story was what was polluting my soul.
Yeah, I felt definitely when I kind of discovered the electric universe, I felt that feeling where I knew I was seeing something that was true. It's almost like everything in our culture doesn't want you to be religious. And maybe that's because that's a glue that keeps us unified so they can't break us up into little collective groups and get us all fighting against each other. But I find that the electric universe model, whether you're an agnostic, an atheist, religion, pick your religion, they all work with the electric universe model. Yeah. And none of them work with the Big Bang model. None of them. I mean, there's just no, it's like a story made to make you feel alone and isolated.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And it's in this understanding of the fundamental connectivity of everything, bringing ether and plasma back into the equation that really makes, once the light comes on and you start seeing life, the universe, and your health and everything through this electric lens, it's a whole other world. Like you've stepped into a whole other world that's illuminated and connected instead of dark and disconnected. And once
Yeah.
that light comes on, it never goes off again.
So what's the ether?
Well, I would say that the ether is the luminiferous ocean of clear light that all waves travel through. So it's the medium. It is the implicate reality. It is the explicate reality. Like this is ether. This is just spun ether. Ether precipitates into plasma. It spins through torsion. Ether spins into plasma, into the positive and negative charges. And then plasma precipitates down into gases, liquids, and solids. But fundamentally, in this simulation, it's all this medium of clear light.
Yeah.
It's
Victor, are you
consciousness.
still there?
Ben vanished.
Did we lose him?
I don't know.
Yeah, we must have. That's okay. I'll edit him in.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've heard ether described as a field of collapsed charges, like little vortexes going infinitely up and infinitely down in both directions. And so I kind of postulate the idea that maybe it connects the different levels of the Russian doll and transfers energy through them, which could be why there seems to be an endless flow of electrons that are being sucked into these star systems, solar systems.
Mhm.
We always wonder, well, where does it come from? Well, maybe it comes from the next layer above.
Mhm.
And we may not know where it originates from, but at least that gives us some idea of how it travels.
You know, Matt, this is making me think of an interesting thing that I came across about the Michelson-Morley experiments and how everything that I found on that topic basically told me that those experiments showed that there was no ether, and that's like the nail in the coffin of the ether. But then one of my flat Earth friends, sent me a paper that said something very different, and I was kind of astonished that this was a completely different account than what I had come across. But basically what this other paper said was that the Michelson-Morley experiment showed that there was no movement, that the Earth was not moving. And that it did show the ether, and that nobody wanted to hear that. And so the whole thing was buried, right? And then we ended up with Einstein's relativity theory, which doesn't make any sense to me and never has. And
yeah, he was the first Fauci.
What's that?
I think he was the first Dr. Fauci, like a science propagandist.
Yeah, a science propagandist, exactly. And so, anyway, it was really stunning to me to read this other interpretation of the Michelson-Morley experiments, that numerous people looked at the results and that they all concluded that the Earth was stationary.
Well, I did a Thunderbolts about the Michelson-Morley experiment, and the conclusion I came to reading the papers was that there was very much an ether, and that they just set their artificial bar for what they decided was going to mean ether as a number that it didn't quite reach, but it did move. And like there was definitely a difference between the relativistic version and the ether version. And then the experiment was redone by a guy named Donnelly, I think. And he had more sophisticated equipment, and he absolutely showed an ether.
Interesting.
Dayton. His last name was Dayton.
Dayton.
I'm sorry, Dayton Miller.
Dayton Miller.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, and like I heard a good explanation for the way light bends around planets that the ether describes too, although what exactly it was slips my mind, but it had nothing to do with relativity. And
yeah, I think relativity is a blind alley, honestly.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's like part of this whole idea to make science remove any possibility of like a divine consciousness.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
There's a little bit more to that. It was actually Arthur Eddington was the original Fauci. He was the one pushing Einstein's ideas. Einstein was very, very skeptical of his own ideas. In fact, in his later years, just before he died, he admitted to someone, he said, I don't think any of my ideas are going to withstand the test of time. He was actually very laudable. You know, I've really pounded his ideas, but as a person, he was very skeptical of his own ideas. He put him out, but it was Arthur Eddington who really cheerleaded his ideas into the mainstream. So you want to blame anyone, blame Eddington, not
Right.
Einstein.
I've developed a real respect for Einstein based on that same thing. I think he knew he was being used.
I think he'd be rolling over in his grave right now.
Yeah.
And apparently he did say also later in his life that space without ether was unthinkable.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, what's carrying?
I agree.
It just doesn't make any sense.
Completely.
It doesn't
agree.
make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense. You have waves traveling through a medium in every other instance: sound, water, everything. And light, no? Really?
Yeah, no,
Nah,
it's
that's
so illogical, right? It's like, oh, these
It
waves
is.
don't need a medium to travel through. I'm like, the very definition of a wave is that it's traveling for a medium. Like, come on, this is so silly. You know, it's interesting because I just recently wrote a paper redefining sound and how, and when I say sound, I don't mean sound in the audible range, you know, which is like 20 to 20,000 hertz. I mean vibrations of any frequency is sound, right? Sure. And so people always want to say, oh, sound doesn't travel through a vacuum. I'm like, who the heck cares? Where is there even a vacuum in any of our lives? Why is that always brought up when we're talking about sound? It's like, show me a vacuum. Like, no. Like, so let's take that argument like right out of the equation because it's irrelevant. But this idea that sound is just a longitudinal wave. It's like, oh, these are just, you know, sound is bumping up against stuff and moving along. But it's always depicted as a transverse wave. So what's up with that, right? We're told it's longitudinal, but it's always depicted as transverse. And basically what I come to realize, just what I was saying earlier, is that our atmosphere is a plasma. So any waves moving through a plasma generates charge. So what we call sound is, it is longitudinal, it is transverse, it is scalar, it is electromagnetic, it is traveling in spirals and moving spherically, and it contains complex geometric information as evidenced in cymatics. Right, so there's so much more to sound than it just being a longitudinal wave. And I've been asserting for years that sound is electromagnetic, and I always get pushback from trolls who want me like, it's a longitudinal wave. I'm like, no, it's a lot more than that. So,
well, here's the other thing. You brought up cymatics, and what cymatics is, of course, is when you put salt or sand on a vibration plate and it makes all those really cool patterns. What you need to remember is the patterns themselves, the actual sand or salt that stays on there, that's the destructive part of the wave. That's not the active part. That's not the part that's going out. That's the part that's where the least amount of energy is. So yes, it creates a cool shape, but the part that's actually doing the work are the spaces in between. Yeah, don't forget that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
yeah.
It is interesting that those same sound patterns we see are etched all over the walls of ancient temples.
Yeah. Yeah, they're everywhere.
Mandalas.
I mean, yeah, the mandalas, the different notes, you know, the rose windows that create the base note of these cathedrals.
Right.
Yeah, I think people used to know what they were talking about, and now we do not.
Yeah, and so much around sound has been obscured. I know when I was doing research for my master's thesis back in 2010, there was practically nothing to be found on sound. Like, I was astonished. And then after the fact, I realized that all of this understanding of vibration, of frequency of sound, of waves, and how they affect people was all DARPA. It was all like military using it for weaponization.
Yeah.
Wow. Jeez.
Yeah.
That's
yeah. I mean, I
jumped
think
down that rabbit hole, and all of a sudden you're like, ah.
I think there probably are UFOs. I don't think they're aliens. I think it's Bill Gates flying around with maybe Zuck or something, anal probing poor strangers on the side of the road. I think it's got nothing to do with aliens. It's just military tech. But one thing's interesting is Bob Lazar claims that the UFOs that he was working on, and man, that dude's story is pretty airtight. He claims he was working on craft that they found in archaeological digs.
Oh, interesting.
That's really bizarre. And I'm a big believer that we probably come from a more advanced society. I think those big stone cities were after we figured out weather manipulation, and they were tired of getting hit with tornadoes and hurricanes, so they started building stone. Can't prove any of that. But if Bob Lazar's story is true, and we've been fed this nonsense that everything is millions of years old, there's no way to test anything, no way to measure anything, can't possibly be a god, can't possibly be any kind of universal consciousness. I think that's to obfuscate that these people know the truth, and they want to create artificial scarcity, so we got to keep buying oil, and I mean, that makes sense to me.
I completely agree. Yep. Without a doubt.
Eileen, this has been a wonderful chat. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast and healing Matt, working on Matt. That's awesome.
You're gonna need a bigger tuning fork, but I appreciate that.
They make really giant ones. I don't have any of those, but yeah, get the big fork.
Yet.
When you're ready to try your giant tuning forks on a real basket case, I'll be your guinea pig.
All right, I'll remember that. Yeah, great talking to you guys. I love these kinds of conversations very much. It's fun to be people who can talk back on such topics.
Absolutely.
It's great to meet you. So I guess we'll wrap it up there then.
All right. Have a good day, everybody.
All right.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to the Brainstorm with Sparks and Finn. Hope you learned something new or found some food for thought. If you did, take a second to smash that like and subscribe button. Consider joining our Patreon to help Sparks and I spread the word. And then join us next time as we explore this amazing electric universe. Cheers!